It was the 15th year after the disaster. For everyone, it was a fairly difficult time. A middle-aged man going up to the young man with concern in his voice stated that this time they came to expel his sister. Not understanding how this is possible, Van Kiao began to ask, which his acquaintance just said, excuses. A person began to explain that he could not do anything, because exiles are always chosen by voting. One of the voters explained that not only is the girl getting sick with tuberculosis, but she still does not know how to do anything useful, and therefore it makes no sense to spend resources on her. Our hero angrily took his blade in his voice, and looking at someone lifted it, sighing heavily. The presentable young man immediately responded to this, saying that the discharge that our hero was guaranteed. The boy is nobody, and therefore must know his place and not try to climb to where he is not asked. Having lowered his head, the young man was dumb. He understood that he had nothing to oppose, and therefore, grabbing a gentleman by the hand, he asked where his sister was left. The man proudly said that the girl was in the mountains, after which he began to laugh loudly. However, Van Kiao was not laughing. The current situation very much upset him. After a while, moving along the forest path, the young man asked his sister to appear, saying that he knew exactly that she was in this place, sitting behind a tree and wiping tears. The girl thought to herself that she no longer wanted to burden her brother, and therefore he should forgive her. But suddenly something happened that the brunette did not expect, because she heard someone's steps behind her. Standing in front of his sister, our hero with a smile noted that she completely forgot who always won hide and seek. Tears flowed from the teenager's eyes, but she was glad to see her own person in this remote place. Suddenly, the guys heard the roar of a beast. The first was the first to react, who immediately ran towards her brother. Everything happened so lightning speed. At a moment, the guy realized that his wounded sister was lying on the ground. Now tears flowed from his eyes. He perfectly understood that something terrible had happened. Jumping out of his place and grabbing the blade, our hero ran in the direction where the monster was, wanting to avenge him. Sitting by the tree, the young man thought that all because he took advantage of the attachment system too late. Van Kiao closed his eyes, realizing that there was a terrible monster next to him. At that moment, a voice rang out in the class, who asked to wake a student who was sleeping again, although he was sitting with his eyes open at the same second. Hearing how the teacher says Van Kiao that their lessons seem to be difficult to believe that he returned to school again. Looking at the dean, the guy remembered that his classmate died at the very beginning of the apocalypse, and now he is alive and well. And it was as strange as possible, and therefore our hero's eyes opened more. At this moment, the teacher said that quotas for a special zone are valuable. They can only be waking up and people younger than 30 years old. Without these permits, the road is closed. Sitting in a misunderstanding, Van Kiao understood that it was about shelters, which means that he actually returned to the past. Calling the system, the young man was happy that she was still on the spot. He also remembered that in a past life, he could not send relatives to the shelter, and therefore his mother died almost immediately. It also ended with her sister too, and therefore this time the young man intended to get into a quota. At the very beginning of the end of the world, Jiang Kun had one important advantage. This is a group of subordinates. It was impossible to survive without this, and therefore Van Kiao and his sister joined them, although they did not want it. But this cruel egoist mocked them, beat and drove along all sorts of trifles until the awakening came. Then for the first time our hero saw real power and decided that everything would be different. The credit company Jiang Kunya had an expensive car. At that moment, someone pierced the stranger's hand with a pen. The man shouted, while the young man, turning to the girl, noted that she had a bad character. Jiang Kun angrily said that the beauty should hold herself in her hands, and could also blame her father, who does not want to return the duty, and mother, who simply escaped. At that moment, a young man, like a guard, began to beat a stranger, saying that she should obey. Lying on the floor, the girl shouted that this would never happen, because she was not responsible for the actions of other people, even if it is her parents. Suddenly, opening the door with his foot, Van Kiao entered the room. The stranger immediately began to speak unflattering about our hero, asking who gave him the right to come to this place. Holding a stick in his hands, a young man without the slightest fear in his voice declared that he was an ordinary superhero. When approaching Van Kiao, men said among themselves that this boy should be taught, because he forgot where he was. The guy was not going to waste time in vain, and therefore immediately struck a crushing blow to one of the ill-wishers. As for the main thing, our hero was not going to ceremony with him, because he grabbed his throat. The young man asked why the company's owner acts in this way, hearing that the whole thing is in debt. Then our hero announced that it was for him to be for another temporary line. Looking in surprise at Van Qiao, the director asked with horror what the boy was talking about and if he had been crazy. Trying to make clarity with the help of a stick, the young man tried to prove something, although the men still did not understand anything. Having dealt with the offenders, the young man crouched to make sure that there was nothing wrong with the girl. With difficulty opening her eyes, the beauty began to ask who was the teenager who saved her. The young man did not answer the question, but instead said that he almost forgot about one thing. Approaching Jung-kun, our hero began to ask where the debt receipt was located. Although the man pretended that he knew nothing and does not understand, throwing a stick on his shoulder, the young man, calmly in his voice, invited the ill-wisher to think well. Having made a dissatisfied grimace, it seemed that the director immediately remembered everything, and therefore pointed to the table where the envelope lay. Getting some sheet from there, the teenager looked carefully somewhere, and then the hand of our hero reached out behind the blade, which he also laid on the table. Passing the letter to the stranger, Van Qiao assured the beauty that she should from now on anything and should no one, and therefore could sleep calmly. Rubbing this sheet, the girl angrily in her voice said that she initially had no reason to anyone and nothing. Seeing the system scoreboard, the young man realized that the first thing he was to help the stranger to awaken his skill, and then the time will come. Our hero decided not to hesitate, and therefore, passing the knife to his new acquaintance, he asked about what her plans for the future he had. The beauty carefully looked at Van Qiao and was silent, realizing that she did not know what to say to him. Having extended his hand, the teenager began to watch drops of water falling on his palm. Raising his head, our hero out loud stated that black rain began again. The panel system immediately greeted the owner and issued information about Zhao Inyuan, who woke up the ability of a rank. Remembering the past times, the young man recalled that abilities belong to 6 basic feelings, and abilities are higher than S level. These are double feelings imposed on each other. Thus, the weakest levels are below, and the most powerful are located at the very top. In a past life, our hero reached the level D, and development went very slowly, and now Van Qiao has a rank of level. It turns out that his strength approached the peak. Looking at her system, the girl was surprised to note that she saw something unusual. And why did she ask why the savior had the same abilities as her? Having a step forward in relation to Zhao Inyuan, the young man tried to choose words, and then smiling, he quickly stated that they were the same. Widely opening her eyes from surprise, the beauty did not understand what this person was talking about at all. Rear to himself, our hero thought that this was connected with numerous awards that the teenager received due to the attachment system. After some time, returning from school, Van Qiao happily noted to himself that one place in the shelter was already there. The guy heard a person offered the guys to go to military service, but the young man was thinking that he needed this not, but his acquaintance with influential people. And then the unknown spoke of strange black rain, as well as a quota received by a teenager, which is very valuable. The girl, realizing that our hero needs another place, suggested that he give his own. The unfamiliar young man was shocked by hearing, while the guys had already agreed on this. Relief on the floor. He says why these two create the illusion that precious places on a special military base disappeared for everyone else. Suddenly, all the audience heard some cry, although they did not understand where it came from. However, then they realized that monsters were chasing a resident of the city. Looking in fright, the girl suggested that these strange creatures for some reason bite each other. The acquaintance of our heroes immediately took out a weapon and ordered the approaching to stay in their places. However, one of the monsters, having caught up with the unfortunate man, grabbed him. A man with weapons, realizing that the situation was heated to the limit, ordered the madman to stop immediately. For some time it worked because he froze. But the next moment a shot was heard, because the situation nevertheless got out of control. The guys watched with horror as one of the zombies hit the guard and fell on him from above. But our hero was not at a loss, and therefore immediately began to generate some energy flows that reminiscent of arrows. Together with ill wishers, our hero shouted that he would quickly decide everything, with whom he succeeded. With those a young man versed with the help of a regular but powerful fist. When everything was settled, Van Qiao thought that the zombies appeared even before the black rain ended. This happened before he thought. Answering a phone call, the young man told his mother that she would not go out on the street, because it was very dangerous here. Suddenly, the teenager heard that some unknown people abducted his sister, not believing that this could happen. Having finally decided to teach the zombies to teach, the young man understood that you could not do without powerful tricks. But the guy was bothered by the fact that in a past life there was no such thing to abduct loved ones. Perhaps the effect of a butterfly affected, strengthening the streams. Our hero realized that he would not allow something to happen to his sister. no matter what. And therefore, at the very first stage, it was necessary to deal with the zombies that carried a serious threat to people, which the teenager did. Zhao Inyuan, who witnessed everything that was happening, did not understand how a young man with the same abilities as her was much stronger. After some time, Van Qiao managed to deal with opponents, so the young man was heading home together with his new acquaintance. Not much time passed, and the guy was already standing in front of the door and pushed it. Having opened her, our hero immediately began to welcome his mother, who was glad to see his son. Hugging a woman, the teenager began to reassure her, saying that she did not worry, because he would definitely return his sister home. And then I decided to ask if these people left any messages. Suddenly, the mother of our hero said that Van Qiao should go to the buildings of Chen Yuan, but did not understand who these people and what had to do with the young man. For a moment, the teenager thought and fell silent. The girl, who had been in the corner all this time, began to explain that Chen Yuan is the half-brother Zhang Kun. Clutching his hand into a fist, our hero understood that in his past life, this man never appeared, hoping that he died at the very beginning of the apocalypse. Van Qiao, going up to his mother, asked to collect her own things, adding that he would take her to the shelter while he himself would look for his sister. Seeing how the woman immediately went to open one of the nightstands, the young man scolded himself for being too much relied on for the past life. The guy knew for sure, if he wanted to protect his family, then henceforth should be much more careful. A few minutes later, the teenager approached Zhao Inyuan and asked what she knew about Chen Yuan. Not much time passed, and the teenager has already brought his parent to the special zone that he spoke of. In the end, Van Qiao explained that he has another reservation for his sister in this place, and therefore, as he finds her, he would immediately bring here, and therefore the woman should not worry. Realizing that the mother still could not decide and leave, the guy asked her to go inside, saying that dirty rain began again. With every minute, the weather became stronger. Despite this, a helicopter constantly patrolled such a secret place, and if it was previously difficult to let the sun go to a woman, now the young man could not decide and leave. Moving along the street, the guys discussed the strange rain that has been going on lately, as well as crazy people. Looking at one of these, the teenager said that, probably, this is a real hell. Understanding that such people in fact are no longer people, our hero has gotten away with one of the ill-wishers. Special energy flows that had strength helped in this young man. With sadness, looking around, the guy decided that it did not seem that the day would bring them something good, given the number of enemies in the streets. A moment later, an explosion was heard, and immediately after that the guys drew attention to the flame of fire, which was around the corner. But the most interesting thing was that our heroes fled to the meeting a stranger, covered by this fire. The beauty fled with all her might. It seemed that she was trying to run away from someone. At that moment, Van Qiao dawned. He realized that this is one of the 10 strongest ends of the world, the Queen of the Flame of Lu Vu. Before the young man did something or say, and the girl was already standing in all her glory in front of him. And again, the teenager remembered his past life, in which he once met with Lu Wu, although he did not believe that it was she who was in front of him. Then a friend of our hero asked how this famous lady could not know, because she is a level of natural disaster. Standing, like bewitched, the guy again asked his comrade, was she really strong? Then, unable to withstand, a friend of Van Qiao began to slow him down, claiming that this queen is a strong elementalist. Now from Lu, it actually blew some kind of heat, but not because it commanded with fire. The reason was something else. Our hero understood that if he became close to this girl, he would become very strong. In a past life, he could not do this, but in this one is not going to lose a unique opportunity. Getting his blade, the young man asked if his girlfriend was ready to fight in this new hell. Not understanding who our hero is going to fight with, Zhao Inyuan's eyes widened with horror. Suddenly a new batch of zombies appeared, which was about to attack the queen. Calling the flame, the beauty screamed so that all her enemies were immediately burned. In less than a few seconds, everything was blazing around, including the earth. Opponents who realized that they decided to attack the wrong girl tried to flee, but they, covered by fire, turned out badly. Although Lu herself did not feel joy, she understood that there was too much zombie, and in order for her fire to act correctly, there should be less or more strengths. But at that moment, the Queen of Fire noticed some movement with lateral vision. She did not understand who this stranger, who swept so quickly that it was difficult to discern him. Turning on the energy flows, the teenager immediately began to deal with the offenders as he could. The guy understood that one could not do with the streams, and therefore connected a windmill to help himself. At that very moment, one of the monsters that Van Qiao did not notice was about to grab him. The young man did not have time to understand anything. He only noticed how the zombies began to crush something. Our hero was saved by the fact that this enemy lay crushed by something heavy and was not able to get out. Turning around, the teenager saw Zhao Inyuan, who triumphantly stood on an old car which she threw into the zombies. Smiling, the beauty said that this new world in which they should live is very interesting. Hearing how the young man said that it was time to deal with these entities, his new acquaintance with enthusiasm noted that she would cover. Understanding that the work was built correctly, Van Qiao shouted loudly what could be started. After a moment, the battle began, and while the guy dealt with one monster, another flew on him right away. Zhao Inyuan, noticing that, immediately jumped off the car and rushed to the aid of a friend. Without distracting from his mission, a teenager, grabbing a sword, began to concentrate energy around him. Understanding that his friend coped with the rest of the zombie, the guy noted that they finally destroyed all the monsters, because he was pretty tired of it. The queen standing behind was thinking about the fact that these guys are so strong that, most likely, they are on the highest line of the rating. Remembering about Lu In, our hero turned around and asked how she feels. Hearing that everything is fine with the beauty, Van Qiao did not waste time, and therefore introduced himself. Young people shook hands. During this action, the Queen of Fire also named their name. And while the young man was doing his job, his friend did something completely indescribable. Understanding that the ally was drawing something on the face of a zombie, the teenager grabbed his head, realizing that this is children'sism. Suddenly, our hero looked at his palm. It seemed to him that there was some kind of glow. However, the teenager decided did not stop and continued to go, hearing how his friend asked to wait a couple of minutes. Not much time passed, and Van Qiao with a decisive step climbed the stairs and was about to go into some room. Being inside, somehow the guy managed to disperse fire around him. Hearing how the system proposes to accept this ability, the young man sincerely enjoyed everything that happened to him. This power was incredible. So incredible that various cutting objects began to fly around the room. For the first time in a long time, the young man felt the power that he had not had before. Even an ordinary blade has now begun to look like an amazing and rare sword. After that, Van Qiao decided to use the ignition and control of metal to do something amazing. Finishing, the teenager aloud said that these two abilities are ideal for each other. Moreover, thanks to this, it was possible to significantly increase their level. After that, our hero made a certain semblance of a bracelet out of the sword, realizing that now it is better to blame him in this way. Before leaving, the teenager saw a small box on the shelf which he decided to take with him. Lu Wu, who did not follow the guy, stood next to Zhao Inyuan and asked what she was doing, referring to strange drawing. The beauty was so carried away that she did not immediately hear the question, and raising the zombie, she asked, perhaps the queen also wants to try herself in painting, which she politely refused. Suddenly, a new acquaintance of our heroes began to ask about where they were going, because it was very dangerous to stay on the street. With calmness in her voice, Zhao Inyuan said that the queen also was on the same unsafe street, and also in the rain. Closing her eyes, the beauty with sadness in her voice stated the fact that she separated from her teammates. Upon learning that Van Qiao's sister was seized, a fiery lady began to be interested in where she was taken and what happened at all. The associate of the young man was embarrassed by the fact that the queen did not manage to really get acquainted with the young man, but was already worried about him. Partially hearing the conversation of the girls, our hero said that they were going to the Qianyuan mansion, and perhaps Lu knows what was happening there. With sadness in her voice, the awakened noted that she had no idea what was happening in that house, but she was definitely aware that the street is full of crazy people. Hearing this, the guy thought to himself that probably the situation was still controlled. However, at the same second, Lu In reported that she wanted to go with them. It seemed that Van Qiao was not ready for such a turn of events, and therefore was very surprised. Hearing how a teenager begins to thank for help, she said that this is not necessary all, because, firstly, she is not a burden, and secondly, this is her duty. Rasting, the guy asked what the girl had in mind when she was talking about the duty, but she quickly joked. Zhao Inyuan, standing aside, felt a little awkward. It seemed to her that she was superfluous, but the young man did not forget about her, because at the same moment he handed over the box that he found in the store. And he added that these are lipsticks of different colors. Not always the ally will use the same monotonous color. Smiling, the teenager triumphantly stated that now they need to rush, because very important things are waiting. Approaching the unknown building, Lu joyfully said that the black rain was over, and therefore, most likely, the crazy people returned to normal life. Van Qiao said nothing, but thought to himself that delighted people did not know that after the cessation of the rain, the real beginning of the catalytic period of the end of the world came. This is exactly the period when the monsters began to emerge, and this was only the very beginning. Because after that, the zombies also began to increase their level, becoming more dangerous. The Awakened did everything possible to increase their knowledge, but it was still difficult to fight monsters. Understanding that the situation would only worsen, the young man knew that he should save his sister, and therefore invited his associates to go inside. Moving along the hall, the guys noted to themselves that there was nothing unusual in the building, although they a little alarming silence. It seemed that our hero also did not alarm anything either, although suddenly the guy sat on one knee while Zhao Inyuan continued to move forward. After a couple of minutes, going up to the elevator, Van Qiao asked his friend if the one on which floor is usually Zian Yuan and the rest. Hearing a negative answer, the teenager decided that it was necessary to climb the top floor, and from there to explore all the premises. The elevator arrived quickly enough, but what the guys saw in front of them plunged them into a real shock. Faded people, in torn clothes, stood inside and intended to go out. Realizing that everything went not according to plan, the guy was very angry. At the same second, one madman jumped out of the elevator who was about to rush at the young man. The rest had already fled behind him. The teenager saw that the zombie was trying to instill fear in him, but remained absolutely calm. Understanding that the danger threatens the whole team, the young man said that the girls would not come close. The reason was that the hunter had already begun his manipulations in order to protect the beauties. The fire covered the opponents, throwing those to the ceiling itself. Understanding that he couldn't cope for one, Van Qiao told his associates that he would cover everyone in front of everyone, and the girls should follow the rear. Winning the energy stream, Zhao Inyuan noted that the guy should not worry about anything. They will do everything as it should. The girl was not going to ceremony with opponents, and therefore immediately began to do her job. This hunter was not of the faint of heart, and therefore stated that she would destroy everyone who was going to harm them. After a couple of minutes, the flame covered the entire Galatian. It seemed that it was even difficult to make out something because of the fire. Realizing that a real fire broke out, the acquaintance of our hero told the Fire Queen that she was too hot for this world. Having received a compliment, trying to build a fence, Zhao Inyuan told her friend that the zombies were very burned, although their power did not go away. That is why the queen began to throw fireballs into rivals. And again, a fiery show began in the room, which was supposed to delight our heroes, but not a zombie. That is why Lu did not stop in, realizing that the lives of the guys depend on her. Turning around, our hero began to smile, realizing that his rear was actually reliably protected. Also, like a colleague, holding a ball of fire in his hands, the young man warned his acquaintances to be careful. Zhao Inyuan laughed, noting that it was better to say about this with a red-haired beauty who does not understand what the real aesthetics of murders are. After that, the beauty began to make some of her manipulations. It turned out that she also decided to play with fire, showing the zombies that the force was not on the side of the crazy. And if everything suited the beauty, then the opponents seemed to be not very good. Looking behind the battle, Van Qiao thought that the queen was still very young and had no experience in battles, so his acquaintance was conducting the battle. The girl, not having time to wake up, began to do all kinds of incredible things, in fact, as in a past life. After some time, our heroes decided to relax, but what they saw did not make them happy. An angry crowd fled at them at high speed, which did not see anything in its path. The young man was aware that they could not restrain so much crazy people, and therefore asked the girls to go to the elevator first. In fact, it was a certain trick, because the guy made sure that he quickly and unexpectedly attached magnets to the backs of his associates. Already after a moment, promoting the energy stream, the young man said that they would fly. Realizing that the beauties are already safe, our hero became opposite the crowd, waiting for them to begin to attack. But since a real fight was not included in Van Qiao's plans, he concentrated and began to concentrate his attention on something. The young man managed to create vines who could stop the zombies. Understanding that this was not for long, the teenager ran to the elevator with all his might. Being inside, the queen asked what went wrong, because the black rain stopped. But there were even more crazy people, and she added that this is not at all what the bureau proposed earlier. Answering a question about a trap, our hero said that now he does not care about this. Most importantly, it is to find his sister. And after saving her, and to himself, I thought that this person was not in the past life, since he died. Understanding that the elevator rises too slowly, putting his hand forward, the guy shouted that now they would rise more quickly. At the top, the picture was no better than below. and 2 crazy were also lying everywhere. Some of them wandered, one generally looked strange enough. Hearing some kind of noise, the ill-wishers approached the elevator as soon as possible. One of the most terrible turned his head and began to wait for something. Cracking the handrail in the elevator, Lu In asked about the noise that she heard, although the guys laughed from her, noting that her own scream was this noise. However, she continued to argue, noting that she actually heard a blow. And this was true, breaking through the roof. One of the monsters was inside the elevator. Our heroes did not expect such a thing, and therefore stood silently, pondering their next steps. Queen was the first to ask what kind of essence that is right in front of them. Our hero, who was usually calm, now also looked at it with horror. Seeing how the monster pulls his hand to his associates, the guy noted to himself that it was already a zombie, but more highly developed. Arndt, a teenager. He did not understand how it could happen that this time the monsters began to evolve so quickly. Realizing that it was difficult to fight inside the elevator, Van Kiao ordered everyone to leave immediately. Standing on what used to serve as a roof, our hero was glad that everyone managed to get out. Understanding that the zombie is not going to stand still, the young man ordered everyone to be careful. The queen, who was afraid of every rustle a few minutes ago, now asked to give her the opportunity to fight the enemy. The beauty understood that everything was not so simple, but she was not going to give up. Despite the zeal of the girl, she had little experience, and therefore Van Kiao decided to help. This was the case when this help was perceived in the most positive way. Zhao Inyuan, who could not wait for her turn to strike, now entering the battle, asked her not to interfere. The acquaintance of our hero managed to turn the elevator into a piece of metal and let it go down to the mine. Smiling, the beauty said that this is all called a happy jump. At that very moment, an unknown guy dealt with another monster. Sitting on the blessings, the stranger asked about whether anyone from the bureau came, and climbing the stairs he told himself under his breath that all this hype was superfluous, because the leader asked to stay in the shade. At that moment the elevator door opened, but Van Kiao arrived together, who was holding onto some crossbar. Hearing that there is a monster on the floor, the guy's associates immediately moved to his aid. The monster was not going to give up. He understood that he had power, and therefore wanted to show her. It was not the same zombie that before. It seemed that after the fall the madman had become even smarter and stronger. That is why the teenager again shouted to everyone to be extremely careful. The enemy did not hear anything and no one, heading for our hero. Zhao Inyuan knew that a lot depends on her, and therefore began to wind up her energy flows. Despite the fact that the beauty did everything as quickly as possible, it did not stop the monster. And again, the young man thought that he did not think that he would have to face such powerful rivals so soon again. That is why the young man began to get his unusual sword. Van Qiao noted to himself that he was no longer the person who was before. The teenager managed to make a fiery mark on the body of the zombie, but then I thought that, as expected, the body of an adult zombie is stronger, so you need to use force differently. For this reason, our hero began to concentrate fire in his palm. This was necessary in order to strike, but not on the body, but in the face. Such tactics made it possible to get the opponent out of balance. The queen, who carefully followed everything, said that she did not suspect that the power of flame could be used in this way, and only the guy was going to take a little breath, as he again saw in front of him a hand stretching from the fire. Van Qiao tiredly began to think about himself why it happened. Because the enemy received significant damage. Only the fact that the guy was fighting was not alone. His associates immediately stood his back to his back, realizing that now there turned to sleep a young man. The beauties managed to develop such power of fire, which literally flew into the enemy. But the point was not only in the flame, but also some kind of metal shell, which also flew on it. The girls stood and watched the result of their own work for several seconds, and then they decided that the attack was not finished, and therefore began to produce fiery arrows. Our hero coordinated the work of his friends, because he knew many nuances from a past life, grabbing his fiery sword to the fight, and the guy also connected, wanting to make his contribution too. The young man began to wield a sword, as never before, although the next minute the guy stopped, realizing that this zombie was somehow transformed. And while the queen was interested in what was happening, Zhao Inyuan said with a smile that this monster was perfect to paint him. Our hero experienced most of all, realizing that with his strength could not cause deadly damage to the ill-wisher. Suddenly, some kind of male voice said that he was watching some kind of scheme. The queen recognized him, because it was Captain Lian Jiangzhou, and asked to help them cope with the monster. The young man said that he had never met anyone like that. Hearing the explanation that zombie has a very strong bone armor. Breaking from his place, the captain was already shouting that the general situation was clear to him. Len Chongchu made a dense blue glow around him, and then shouted that he liked to break hard things most of all, and he immediately attacked the enemy, realizing that he needed to defeat him. The young man shouted that this zombie resembles some kind of comic character, and those are stronger nuts. Next, the captain grabbed the monster by the hand, deciding to use other tricks. He did not stop, doing everything possible that depends on him to save his new acquaintances. Having entered the hand-to-hand combat, Lian Zhengzhou was surprised to discover that the opponent had a force to recapture this blow. Understanding that the captain was perfectly timed, Van Qiao shouted to the girls that now there is a great moment to attack the heart of the monster. Smiling, the associates noted that they would do it with great pleasure. While our heroes thought how best to do this, the zombie had already grabbed Lan Jianzhou with such force that it was difficult to believe in it. At this moment, the girls directed a powerful stream of fire towards the ill-wisher. It was such a strong fireball that seemed to be destroyed by everyone. Realizing that you can't stop there, our hero took his sword in order to also contribute to the battle. Taking a crushing blow, the guy hoped that such an approach would be much more effective than previous attempts. All the audience carefully watched the monster. A moment later, the zombie disappeared into the fire stream, which was very powerful. Van Qiao stood. He did not dare to leave the place where the ill-wisher was recently. Rubbing his wrist, Lian Jianzhou thought that our hero was a wonderful fighter. Putting on his bracelet, the young man saw how Zhao Inyuan cried, saying that her white board was burned for drawing. Hearing that the queen said that the captain was too impulsive and almost lost his life, he said that the beauty was underestimated by him, because he was just warming up. However, the guys did not have time to finish, because at that moment our hero approached Lu Vu and asked who this unknown is. The girl immediately called the name of her friend, speaking that he is considered the owner of a high level. Young people, going up to each other, immediately began to shake hands. Van Qiao immediately thought that in a past life he did not hear the name of this person, although he is very strong. It was interesting whether it was possible to tie his strength, but everything was not so simple. The system immediately reported that it was impossible. After that, the men decided for themselves that it would be interesting for them to somehow fight each other. The queen intervened in the conversation and stated that they should notify the bureau as soon as possible. The beauty emotionally said that the black rain had stopped, but these madmen still did not come to their senses. However, Lian Zhengzhou, putting his hand on the shoulder of his friend, stated the fact that the bureau already knew everything. Our hero, who listened to the conversation of the guys, could not understand which office was in question. At first, Lu thought that this was a secret, but her friend noted that nothing secret has long been gone. Therefore, the girl explained that she and the captain are employees of the Bureau of Special Security, an official organization designed to regulate civil awakening. The teenager looked as if he knew something about it, which caused surprise from a new acquaintance. However, our hero immediately said that in fact he had not heard anything. It is just strange that there was something like that. The captain explained that not all awakened remains mentally stable. Supernatural forces change the human mind, and therefore should be followed. Van Qiao thought to himself that this organization most likely is the predecessor of a society of 6 feelings. It is only difficult to believe that something similar appeared before the zombie of the apocalypse. It turns out that the Flame Queen was a member of the Society of 6 Feelings from the very beginning. The guy asked a new acquaintance whether he collided with someone while he climbed the very top. Lian Zhengzhou did not immediately understand who we were talking about, and therefore asked about it. The guys looked at Zhao Inyuan, but continued to discuss that there were no more people in the building. There were only crazy people. The teenager was surprised to hear this. He understood that his sister was exactly another place. Turning around, the young man immediately went somewhere away. The young man heard him turn to him. However, he said that he had to go. At this time, in some unknown room, which looked like an office, zombies lay everywhere. Jumping over the table, Van Qiao thought that due to the fact that he was reborn, his sister was the first to get into trouble. It was stupid to follow the previous memories if he changed the current events. Finally, the guy stopped, and then aloud said that this simply could not be. In front of our hero lay a man who looked like a girl from the back. Squatting, tears flowed out of the young man. He thought that his sister, who could not be saved, was lying in front of him. Van Qiao understood that it was no longer possible to pull, and therefore he took a man by the shoulder to turn him over. However, seeing a stranger, our hero immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Realizing that he was too upset, the young man understood that people managed to leave on time while the crazy people were populated. For a while, the teenager stood, thinking about his further actions. Seeing the Queen of Flame, the guy told her the same thing that recently thought that his sister managed to leave. The beauty smiled, assuring that this is good, and therefore Van Kiao should not lose heart. But there was nothing to rejoice, since the teenager had no idea where the girl could go, given that she had not returned home. Suddenly, Lian Jianzhou, hearing the conversation, "Guys," he said, "he seems to know where everyone went." The young man explained that the alien energy vibration of the awakened level appeared earlier, because he came here to explore it. And he added that if the sister was in this building, then most likely she is now with some awakened. This was surprised by our hero, but the captain said that he was a professional in this matter, after which he showed something on the map of a mobile phone. At this time, some people gathered in another room, although it was hard to say who they were. Several guys, including the sister of our hero, watched the horror that took place. Having taken up the man's head in the ice shell, the unknown said why not to behave normally to everyone gathered. Cracking stronger, the ill-wisher stated that all these people are valuable material. The next second, this ice block scattered into hundreds of smaller parts. The guys did not understand how this could happen, and therefore simply stood silently. The villain laughed, despite the fact that he said with sarcasm in his voice that he was painful every time he breaks one of the experimental. At that moment, doctors entered the room. They turned to the stranger, as Mr. Su Lan, and stated that experimental equipment was ready. Continuing to smile, the young man noted that if so, then the time is to prepare for the beginning. After that, doctors began to twist the guys and led them somewhere. Turning around, Su Lan asked where Yinzheng was located, and the rest, learning that they were on the second floor. And he added that the girl is lazy, and therefore he will find her himself. Professionals should do their own business. In a large room, a man lay attached. He heard the rest shouted and asked them to let go. The attached, the sister of our hero, hoped that someone would free her after all. At this time, our heroes came to some kind of building. Lian Jiangzhou told everyone that the vibrations were ending in this place, which means that the awakened is there. Van Qiao, full of determination, noted that it is impossible to lose a minute. It is necessary to enter. While in an empty lobby, Lu In asked her colleague if he was sure that someone was really here because it was very quiet around. The guy answered in a calm tone, "If the guys do not believe him, then they should believe in science." Wiping the dust from the table, our hero noted that the feeling that this place has not been populated for a long time. Lian Jiangzhou did not believe it, and therefore shouted that this simply could not be. Climbing the stairs, Van Qiao talked about the fact that in a past life, when the period of hell began, he actually did not know much. Hearing how a new acquaintance says that there is nothing, the teenager thought that the young man is probably still hiding something else. Trying to find at least something, our hero decided to look at the shelf, hoping there to find a possible clue. Although the captain immediately said that this makes no sense, since the place that needs to be awakened is located in a particular house. However, the young man still picked up the phone, because something seemed to him suspicious. While the guy was busy with his business, Lu turned to Van Kiao and asked, perhaps some interesting idea occurred to him. Suddenly, the teenager shouted that those who they need could be underground. The queen aloud said that, most likely we are talking about the basement. Having become in the combat pose, Lian Jiangzhou said that it makes no sense to guess. You just need to check every hypothesis. And the next instant, all the audience paid attention to the fist, which was about to strike. Everything happened so quickly that the guys did not pay attention to the blow, but they heard him well. At this very time, two men were sitting in some room, one of whom turned to the other, like Qian. The stranger asked what they needed, although he did not specify exactly who we were talking about. However, the dialogue was not completed, since the ceiling failed in the room and it became very dusty. The red-haired young man closed his nose with his hand and continued to ask about what happened. The captain laughed, telling his friends that they were right, because there really was something below. At that moment, Zhao Inyuan pointed to our hero at Chen Yuan, who was sitting in the corner. A man in a suit scaredly began to ask if his children came to know. With angrily in his voice, the guy said that the wretch had abducted his sister, and said that the teenager would come in person, so he is here. Suddenly in the room, it became light. Energy flows were visible everywhere. In the place where two men were sitting a couple of seconds ago, now there was no one. Moreover, on the place of Lian Jiangzhou, who was standing still, something incomprehensible was approaching from behind. The young man realized that something was wrong, and therefore managed to turn around and struck his foot. The guy understood that this was an attack stealthily, and therefore called those who invented all this real rats. Having erected a huge ice wall near him, the ill-wisher said that he came across strong rivals, and he added that probably the dog that followed him everywhere, this is the captain. The young man did not like such an appeal. Therefore, squeezing his fist, he stated that the villain stinks of his mouth, and therefore it was better to rinse him. The second man, who was sitting in the far corner of the room, said that he was not to blame for anything. He did not touch the young man's sister. Van Qiao already knew about it, and therefore began to be interested in where the girl was located. Having made a grimace, Qian Yuan said that, "Probably our hero has in mind the material." And, laughing, he added that the one that could be called a sister is probably not alive anymore. Looking at the villain in surprise, the young man began to ask what the enemy said. Looking at his hands, the teenager thought with horror that he even, having received a great opportunity, could not do everything. And after a little hesitation, the ill-wisher continued to say that our heroes came on time to pick up the body. Filling fire, the queen called the villain the most unflattering words. However, the red-haired beauty did not manage to do anything, because she saw something interesting. Suddenly, Zhao Inyuan entered the battle, who prepared her gifts, and therefore screamed that the enemy would not be sweet. The opponent carefully looked at the girl, but was in no hurry to leave his seat. Stretching his hand forward, the young man asked what kind of violence it was. And the next minute, a powerful protection in the form of ice appeared in front of a girl in Qian Yuan. With despair, the acquaintance of our hero noted that this protection is very strong. At the same time, the villain called the beauty ungrateful, about to do something. For a moment, Zhao Inyuan's eyes widened from what she saw. Ice arrows flew towards the girls, and therefore it could be said that the bad person not only defended himself, but also attacked. Lian Jianzhou understood that he not only needed to save acquaintances, but it was also necessary to deal with the villain. But before the guy had time to do anything, he felt that someone grabbed his legs. The young man did not understand who it was, because they were already in the basement, but saw someone's palms. Everything happened so quickly that Lu did not have time to understand where the captain failed. Now at the place where a colleague stood, an ordinary hole was visible. Be that as it may, and the confrontation between Qian Yuan and Zhao Inyuan continued, and it seemed that the girl could hardly restrain the attack. The beauty did not lose heart. She had a plan in which the acquaintance of our hero had no doubt at all. The villain did not count on this, and therefore shouted and did not understand what was happening. Having gathered his strength, the young man began to scream, saying that the beauty still could not beat him. At that moment, an explosion was heard again in a short period of time. Two figures standing in smoke and dust were as difficult as possible to see as much as possible. Zhao Inyuan did not yet understand what was with her, but she knew for sure that she was not very good. The reason was that the girl was injured, and that sharp ice spear. Despite this, the acquaintance of our hero smiled. She said that now the enemy was finally caught. Grabbing his hand, the hunter said that it was time for revenge and asked why the man was so stupid. Standing in its place, Van Qiao told himself that now there is no time to indulge in thoughts. There are more important things. Accelerating, the teenager thought to himself that he was obliged to do it. The young man saw what was happening, and therefore fled in the direction where his ally stood. However, there was not only her but also Yin Zheng, who smiled. Hinging the zipper, the woman said that it was time to meet her a guy. And again for some time our hero stopped, because he had never seen anything like that before. Turning around, Qian Yuan shouted so that the woman did not interfere, because it was only his battle. But unexpectedly, the enemy began to wrap up with some purple threads. Raising her hands again, the wounded girl continued to say that the enemy was caught. Unable to move, the man realized that Van Qiao also came to the aid of the beauty, who also knew a lot. However, the villain was not going to give up so easily, and therefore called on the ice shield to his aid. Zhao Inyuan, despite the wound, controlled the situation as she could, seeing that she was running in Luvu. The queen, seeing the condition of the friend, said that she should immediately stop what she had begun, because the bleeding should be stopped, because this was so tight. But she was not going to listen, and therefore did her job while the ally said that it was still tolerant. Due to the dense fog, as a result of the battle between the flame and the ice, Van Qiao could not see anything. The guys saw only an ice ball, not understanding whether they managed to get into the enemy, as well as in what condition he was. Almost getting rid of threads, Qian Yuan rejoiced, saying that the opponents were close, but never reached the goal. All three, with sadness in his voice, said that this simply could not be. And at that moment, some monster somewhere in the dungeon was told by Lian Jianzhou that it was probably difficult for him to breathe. And he added that the rats on which the young man looks down can easily adapt to life underground. The captain did not know who was underground, and therefore asked the enemy, did he really control the land? But he only stated that the guy is worse than the rat. But for now he has the opportunity. Then let him enjoy being in this place. At this time, Qian Yuan, who for some reason partially froze, shouted loudly, while in a protective capsule, the villain stated that young people would still have to pay for everything they did. The enemy called the guys small ants, and our heroes thought about how it happened that this man became stronger. Having got out of the dungeon, the awakened asked Yin Jing if they had finished with the teenagers, hearing that Mr. Sulan wanted to play a bit. It seemed that Van Kiao had planned something, because he ran from one point to another. Zian Yuan saw rivals below, but could not understand what they wanted to do. However, the teenager again, gathering all his strength into the stream of fire, began to direct it somewhere. After that, the young man made his former sword out of this random stream and shouted indecent curse. And then the young man twisted the fire in some kind of whirlwind and directed it to where the villain was. The man laughed, noting aloud what kind of newcomer, who decided to throw the weapon in the midst of the battle. But the next instant, the face of the happy Chen Yuan ceased to be so. Now Van Kiao was laughing, saying that it was a well-prepared trap. Shards stuck out on the ground, which fell from the defense of the villain, while at the time where he was, there was a fiery explosion. The wounded Chen Yuan said that he almost managed to dodge, although not quite. Our hero, looking at the enemy, thought that he was so close to his goal, confident that he would cause serious damage to the villain. But this did not happen. Raising his head, the guy decided that they should immediately get rid of this person. And while the teenager was heading in the direction where the wretch was standing, the monster that had recently attacked the captain was already ready to attack Van Kiao. Feeling a strong blow in his hand, the young man screamed, as it was unexpected and unpleasant, but he was not going to give up, and therefore continued to attack in order to win an unconditional victory. Lu Wu, looking at the ill-wishers, said that it should be ashamed. A person could not win, and therefore they are immediately pounced. However, the enemies laughed, noting that the girl is very naive and did not know real life. Chen Yuan, gradually recovering, said that Van Kiao awakened, who owns two forces. To himself, the young man thought that he was hiding his ability to control metal in order to keep the enemy into tension. Our hero wanted to destroy the ill-wisher with one blow, but he blocked him. The trouble was that the stone man dragged Lan Jianzhou to the hole. The queen was demoralized, and Zhao Inyuan was wounded, and therefore only he could fight. At some point, the monster noticed that the earth began to somehow rise strangely. And after a moment, a captain jumped out from there, who immediately grabbed a stone man. The young man was going to avenge himself, and therefore did everything to inflict maximum damage to the enemy. The guy shouted that he would teach opponents to respect normal people. In the next instant, all the audience heard the sound of an explosion. Standing in the middle of destruction, Lian Jiangzhou tried to understand what happened. Understanding that the enemy was gone anywhere, the young man said that, as for a rat, the opponent is quite fast. Standing at the other end of the room, ill-wishers tried to somehow recover and recover. A stone man stated that the blow was as strong as possible. He did not wait for anything like that. At this time, the guys asked each other how everyone feels and was ready to fight further. Realizing that they only warmed up a bit, the system immediately notified that young people became friends, and therefore Van Kiao received various return rewards. While the teenager understood what his comrades were capable of, Chen Yuan said that they would continue to fight ants. Yinzheng told his comrade, in arms, that the evacuation was almost completed, they need to prepare for the export, but he was angry that they were indicated to what to do. However, the woman screamed that the man was not in himself, and he was best to calm down. Having hit her acquaintance so that he would not resist, the beauty ordered a stone man to leave and allow the crazy people to let go to the street. Seeing that the ill-wishers were leaving, our heroes were a little alert and thought, without deciding what to do next, the young people rushed in the direction where the villain stood, calling those rats and asking where they gathered. The woman shouted to her assistant to follow the plan. She would stop these boys. For some moment Van Kiao really stopped, because he saw a bright blue glow in front of him. The same concerned the captain. He also slowed down for a while. The guys understood that the defense was to the left of them, and therefore the path is free. Having run up close to the opponent, Van Kiao said that she missed. The woman smiled angrily, showing with all her appearance that they had confused something. Now Lu Wu was alert, carefully looking at the stones on the sides, closing the head of her associate and her own. The beauty said that everyone would be as careful as possible. The guys did not quite understand what happened. While Yin Jin tried to damage to young people, the woman asked her opponents where they were looking, continuing to tighten powerful streams of energy. Indeed, the light was so bright that it blinded young men into the eyes. Looking around, everyone understood that everything was destroyed around. There were a lot of stones, and Yin Jin managed to escape. Understanding that there are no girls anywhere, and a pile of stones lies ahead, Our heroes were not seriously scared. They had such a shock that it was not clear what to do next. Having closed her eyes as soon as possible, the queen aloud spoke about whether she died. Zhao Inyuan only asked her friend how long she was going to pretend to be dead. Having a little shifting Lu, the girl said that she was grateful for the salvation, but there was no need to lean on her with all his strength. After that, the acquaintance of our hero leaned over. It was clear that she feels bad. This was noticed by a frightened red-haired hunter who did not know what to do. And while the queen tried to put her friend, the voice of Lan Jianzhou was heard from the outside, who asked if he was hearing Lu in. Understanding that the help was already very close, the beauty screamed that they were under the stones that created a kind of cocoon. Young people understood that their associates were inside. On the one hand, it was good that they were alive, but on the other, it was necessary to remove stones so as not to harm. Our hero knew special equipment and therefore began to move huge blocks. After a couple of minutes, everything was ready. The queen joyfully talked about how well that they were saved. Sitting in some kind of comor, one man told the second that he had pulled him into an adventure. Suddenly, one of them pointed to the exit, noting that it was best for them to leave now while there is such an opportunity. The men consulted and thought that this was actually a great idea. Clutching, the fugitives ran in the direction where they were going. At this time, our heroes slowly came to their senses, thinking what to do next. Lian Jianzhou said that he needed to think a little, picking up a mobile phone. The guy noted that the opponents did not go far, but stopped somewhere nearby. Van Qiao was as surprised as possible, because they heard the villains said that they were going to evacuate somewhere. The next moment, a noise was heard in the corridor, and therefore the guys told the girls to stay in place, while they themselves wanted to understand what was happening. At that moment, the zombies fled after people, and those in turn tried to escape from the pursuers. One person convinced the other that they should return to the awakened. Only there they would be safe. However, the brunette, smiling viciously, said that he had some other idea. Saving his life, a man pushed his comrade into the hands of a zombie. He himself ran to meet our heroes, asking them to help him. Young people were in no hurry to do something. For starters, they were going to figure out the situation. Stepping closer to Van Qiao, the man said that he would do whatever the guy wants, but in return wants to be saved. The teenager immediately pressed the stranger against the wall and fell silent at some point. And then he said that the young man should name at least one reason why he should not be killed. Smiling viciously, the stranger noted, "The reason is that the young man's sister may be still alive." Silence reigned in the room. Our hero did not understand what this means. But the stranger explained. The blue-haired man told them that they were some valuable experiments, and the girl was taken away after the guy arrived, so she should be still good with her. And after a moment he added, "If Van Qiao spare him, he will receive a lot of money," while the brunette continued to say that he was the most ordinary person. Lian Jianzhou also said that he should not touch this poor fellow. He did nothing bad. In the eyes of our hero, some kind of rage was read. It seemed that he had planned something. Realizing that the stranger began to cover the fire, he shouted, asking what else the teenager needs. However, Van Qiao calmly noted that he has long been no longer a person. Hearing that the captain did not understand why this, the young man had already said that it was time for them to go because his goal awakened. And he added, "If they wait too long, then the opponents will run away." Lian Jianzhou did not understand how this is possible, and the guy explained that it was impossible to believe in a lie, since the second side behaved in a special way. And he added that they were awakened by the force suddenly burst into the base of the other side. But she was not at all surprised. But on the contrary, she looked as if she was preparing for this. After that, the guys began to decide that it was best to act together, since it would not be possible to win alone. And if so, then Van Qiao asked the captain to share all the information that he knew. Watching how brutal zombies flew in their direction, young people realized that now they would not be up to conversations. The monsters shouted, wanted to show that for them people, this is the simplest prey. Lian Jianzhou was not going to say or explain anything. He knew his task very well and fulfilled it. Having dealt with several, the young man thought about why there are so many zombies in this place. But time passed, and therefore it should be acted as soon as possible that Van Qiao began to do. Our hero used metal spears, with whom he had dealt several times. At the same time, the guy kept the defense in such a way that the monsters could not approach him. Standing behind, Lian Jianzhou was a little envious of the teenager, thinking that he was incredibly cool. Part of the zombies fled, like the main enemies of our heroes, which upset the guys. But Van Qiao did not give up, saying that he would try to catch up with the fugitives. Around there was a fire. This time he was kindled by Lu, who understood that the monsters would not wait. The comrade-in-arms noted that the girl does not use her own abilities in an original enough, but at that time it did not matter. The queen understood that with every minute the madman became more and without help, would not have been able to hold out for a long time. However, the acquaintance of our hero was sure that he would come soon, because he was one of them. It is not clear who we are talking about, but it doesn't matter, because the problem was another. Although Zhao Inyuan continued to consider Van Xiao as a real superhero, at the same time he did one so that the zombies would become less and less. The captain also fought fiercely, because at least it was necessary to survive, and, at a maximum, to leave this place alive. While Lian Zhengzhou fought off the zombie, our hero and his acquaintance went to the exit, hearing that the young man would cover them. Suddenly, an explosion rang out again in the room, as a result of which several crazy people were disabled. The captain, pointing to the corridor, said that all the audience needs to hurry, since the zombies will soon come to their senses and attack again. Suddenly, Van Xiao said, "No matter what they run away, these monsters still know where to look for them." The young man explained that these creatures seem to slow them down in an organized manner, and the rest thought, this means that everything returns to normal. Our hero knew exactly about this, since the process of turning into a zombie is irreversible. Only entering the 5th stage can be found sanity and consciousness. A moment later, Van Xiao moved to the forest where several people were sitting. Then he asked if someone could manipulate the zombies. An unknown man spoke about King Zombie, an awakened person, a high level, and he is very famous in the southern region. This creature assured that in the place of his residence there are practically no living people, only terrible zombies. While the sister of our hero was horrified, he thought that these creatures deserve more trust than those companions that at any moment could strike in the back. At that moment, Zhao Inyuan touched the guy's cheeks, leaving him out of thought. Out loud, the teenager said that he was all right, but thought to himself that he hoped that the king of zombies would not appear so early. The second guy at that moment was engaged in breaking the wall, because it was dangerous to use the doors. Besides this, I did not want to waste time leaving the dungeon. Stopping briefly, the young man said that they finally managed to get out. The city was gloomy and dark. Dilapidated buildings reminded of the gloomy time that came. Looking at his phone, the captain explained that he could not track the fugitives. The zombies were in order to tighten the time in search. Thinking about further actions, our hero was aware that the wound of Zhao Inyuan demands treatment, and without the strength of all the guys he would not be able to defeat the villains. Van Xiao did not believe that he would be taken to the bureau, but the young man said that this would not be a problem, because every awakened was very important. Our hero was about to hit the road, but the captain explained that he had sent the coordinates, and they would come for them very soon. The next minute, the guy launched something like a fireworks, which lit up half of the district. Only a couple of minutes passed, and the guys had already seen a helicopter, saying that it was very cool. The first on a stretcher in a helicopter was placed a wounded girl. While Lu and the vehicle climbed inside, Lian Zhenzhou gave someone orders that the entire area needed to comb, because zombies roam it. It was impossible to lose time, and therefore, having plunged our heroes, the helicopter began to leave this place. Looking out the window, Van Xiao mentally told his sister that she was waiting for him. In some room on the table lay several documents. One of them touched the sister of our hero, and it stated that the object 17,201 passed the first phase of testing, initially awakening his abilities. Being in some room, Chen Yuan got angry with his familiar and even wanted to hit her. He frantically shouted about how she could stun him at all. This could last a long time, but unexpectedly in the room there was a phone call. The male voice stated that he was disappointed in a man with a blue Harry, who was trying to make excuses. And he added that the words in such a situation are unnecessary. Now the main thing is that they will be hunted by the security service, and therefore will have to hide for a while. Hope remained only on the fact that this organization will soon be uninteresting. The unknown praised a wooden man, saying that an important mission will be entrusted to him. Having received tasks, the ill-wishers unanimously stated that they would do everything as it should. The next day, interesting events unfolded in a completely different place. Van Xiao showed his comrade what he was capable of, and he thought that the young man was actually very strong. And he said out loud that, perhaps, with the help of this ability, the teenager will be able to make his name to the reference book of highly potential abilities. The young man did not understand what was at stake, but a friend explained that this was a list of Class S abilities, and higher. After that, young people began to talk about psychic abilities, as well as their achievements. Our hero had never heard of anything like that before, but he did not need it. Although Lian Zhengzhou continued to develop this topic and it seemed that she was actually close to him, the captain said that it is very important to combine his abilities, and to do it carefully and correctly. Van Chao thought to himself that it was not surprising when he used the strength of the associates. It seemed to him that he was his own power. But during this action, the teenager sometimes feels negative. The reason lies in the fact that other people's abilities did not merge with his own. It seemed that the guy was dawned, because he decided that it was possible not only to connect all his strength together, but to choose their favorite and create the strongest abilities. Moving along the street, Lian Zhengzhou told, as expected, "The Bureau is looking for those crazy people who act in an organized manner, but so far there are no results." Our hero needed a clue, but it was difficult to find it, because everything was very confused. However, the captain was scared that the team of Chen Yuan could somehow control the zombies, which would be catastrophic. Approaching some house, Van Chao for a moment seemed to be a mother from an open window. The young man carefully looked at the woman and tried to make out her facial features. The teenager understood that it simply seemed to him because the parent was in a safe place, but the young man was swallowed by a feeling of guilt, and therefore he did not understand how he would look a woman in the eye if something does not go according to plan. At this time, in the house of Zhao, Inyuan was passionate about some kind of occupation, so that I did not immediately understand that someone had come in. The girl was glad to see a friend who asked what the beauty paints. Turning the canvas, she happily stated that she was painting Van Kiao. From a sheet of paper, a wonderful character looked at our hero, and the ally at that time asked if her art guy liked her art. Wanting not to offend her friend, the teenager laughed and, embarrassed, began to talk about what looked good enough. In the next minute, the girl spoke that, how good it was that Lu stopped bleeding. And while the young man examined other pictures of the hunter, there she continued to declare that the doctor did not want to let her go. Our hero understood that the wound was not easy, but could not fully understand why Zhao Inyuan was kept in the hospital for so long. It was already dark outside when a teenager knocked on a door. Lian Zhengzhou was happy to open him, saying that his colleague would go and not be shy. The guy said that he found some interesting information about the gang. All the data is in the envelope. The captain explained that this information is secret, but their leadership wants Van Kiao to join them. The young man thought that the Bureau would actually become a blessing for him and his family. Moreover, during a difficult period it will be possible to hide. There are other advantages. And therefore, our hero happily said that he agreed. And then Lian Zhengzhou said that he had prepared a test for his comrade, who would take place every other day, and added that there would be nothing complicated for such a strong one as him. After that, the guy noted that he wanted to talk about the predecessors of their office, namely, about the Bureau of Six Feelings. Opening his eyes in surprise, the young man thought that it was actually very interesting. While the captain tried to remember something, scratching his head, our hero was busy reading the information collected. He was struck by the fact that Six Feelings were a special security service, but somehow turned into an organization that stole Van Chao's sister. At this moment, the captain explained that this is a society, an international group of vicious awakened, which often abduct peaceful for experiments. A specific case is described in a document that is in the hands of a guy, but the young man did not have time to read to the end, because they called him. And after a while, Lian Zhengzhou said on the phone that they managed to find a group of survivors who did strange things, but it is still worth checking. The guy added that now on the assignment, so he could not check in person, but will send the coordinates. Turning to Zhao Inyuan, the young man said that he was leaving, and the girl remains in the hospital. But after a couple of seconds, the associate changed her and was ready to go check the received information. Realizing that the beauty still could not stop, the young man smiled and stated that in this case they would go together. The guys were sitting in a car to which crazy people fled from all sides. The driver said that something is wrong with these zombies, since their attacks follow the tactical scheme of vile attacks. And he added that their team was taken by surprise and suffered heavy losses. Survived only 3, including it. And judging by the fact that the crazy people actually behaved very strangely, it was impossible not to believe in it. Stopping in the appointed place, the driver asked Van Chao about something. He said, "If it is true that behind these madmen are those who manipulate them to kill, then the young man must destroy these people." Looking somewhere to the side, the teenager said that he would do everything possible. At the same time, zombies walked around an unfamiliar room. Some man, sitting at the door, shouted to someone so that he would not hesitate, but did his job. The man manipulated someone, noting that if a young man destroys those 2 who are in front of him, will be free. A wooden man reported a fat man that they had a new goal. This is a group of 20 survivors, and he noted that everything is fine. because everything is going according to plan. While the men were talking, one of the crazy bites in the appearance of a completely adequate young man. It was strange enough to observe this, because the action looked as incomprehensible as possible. And a wooden man continued to note that this time it was necessary to do everything quickly, and it was necessary to infect the survivors, and not as before, they could take everyone, but lost a lot of zombies and released 3. The fat man did not really like it, and therefore he was silent, stood up and went down. The man began to disperse energy in such a way that everyone who was below looked like zombie. The fat man came up to that young man who had bitten more recently, and he already looked like an ordinary crazy one.